So I talked to a lot of designers in Japan. So they have very, pride in their work. So they want to make their design perfect before shipping or even to showing to their colleagues.
Right. So for example, at Figma, when you open a file, you don't know who made what.
That's true.
Right. And the reason behind it is it's just the design, right? It's not somebody's design. Like you're a team working on it together. I think with product designers, I think that with product design, it's not about the designer at all. You shouldn't be able to look at a product and see an artist, right? It's really about the best products. Even at Figma, we have a philosophy where it shouldn't be so obvious when, our interface is, there. It's because otherwise it'll get in your way because you're doing your own work.
Right.
If there's this Figma brand coming in all the time.
It will distraction.
Yeah, it's very distracting. Yeah.
So Yuki Yamashita-san, welcome to PIVOT.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so you're a Chief Product Officer of Figma. We use it, but it's like a design collaboration tool. Can you elaborate what Figma is to our audience?
Yeah, so Figma started as a tool for designers, and we really thought about kind of how to make design as collaborative as possible on the web. And over time, we've become a platform for product development.
Right.
So how do you go from an idea to the final product? And so we have some tools for ideation like FigJam, and then you can turn them into designs and prototypes in Figma Design. And then with dev mode, how do you hand that off to developers and turn the design into code? So that's how we think about our platform.
Okay, so today's topic will be about modern design.
Yeah.
And before that, could you introduce yourself to our audience? So
Sure.
You're originally from Japan?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah, so I spent half my childhood in Tokyo.
Tokyo,
here.
okay.
And then the other half in other parts of Asia, like Singapore and the Philippines. Yeah, and then went to the US for college, and then from there ended up working in tech. Yeah.
So you joined Microsoft, Google, Uber, and then to Figma.
Right. That's
Okay.
right. Yeah.
So first of all, could you kind of define what design is?
Well, I think at the highest level, design is problem solving. Right? It's saying, okay, users have this problem. How do we come up with the best solution? And I think a lot of design is about pushing for what's possible. One of the biggest questions that designers like to ask is, what if? What if this doesn't have to be this way, or there is a better way? So I think that's at the highest level what design is. And I think that's different from what people say design is, which is just, making something look beautiful.
Or like graphics or...
Yeah. And that's important too, but at the end of the day, it has to solve a problem really well. Yeah. And I think it's about solving a problem functionally, but also in the process, making someone feel something, and so, when you're using products, for example, the emotions you have are also important.
Right.
But most important is how elegantly are you solving the problem? Yeah.
I like your definition, but do you think your definition will change because we're in the age of AI and generative AI? Do you think that will change?
Yeah. Well, I think this definition is even more important. In the age of AI, because in the age of AI, I think there are many aspects of design that people think traditionally become more accessible. Right? It becomes easier to make something look interesting or beautiful. But that's not all it is. And at the end of the day, if what design is solving people's problems, then I don't think the human element becomes even more important. Yeah.
So just to go dive deeper, I have a slide.
Sure.
So this is created with Figma.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. This was more talking about this is a talk that I gave a few years ago, and we're talking about kind of misconceptions around design. And this idea, for example, that, people think that this is the perfect process for getting something done, right? But the reality is that it's just a mess.
It's all mixed up in this.
Yeah. Or, people think that the correct thing to do is to define a problem and then come up with a solution. But actually, most people have some kind of intuition for the idea. And then they're like, oh, wait, what's the problem?
Yeah. We have the solution first.
Yes. And I think, I think we're kind of taught that that's wrong. And it's definitely important to define the problem, right? But I think it's trying to say, hey, like actually the creative process, the design process is not always linear. It's not always one template, and it's okay. So that's kind of like the first thing. I think the other thing I really wanted to talk about was the fact that, one of the ways that design is changing is it used to be this very clean process of, okay, I define something and then I hand it off and then go back and iterate. But, right now it's like every day your product is allowed to change. So for example, at Figma, if we got feedback today that people are not excited about something, tomorrow we can change the product, right? And so in that world, even your product is a work in progress. And one of the things that we learned, and it's been a while ago, but for example, right, like in the past, if you wanted to change the car dashboard, it would have taken years.
Right.
It's too late.
Too late. Yeah.
But if you go to a Tesla, they can just ship a change tomorrow, right?
Like updating the
So you have like more dynamic UI. And I think that happened when in the document world too, where I used to work at for example at Uber or YouTube, where I realized that with Google Docs I can share early, and I can just say, hey, here's my work in progress strategy doc, and then right after I share, a minute later I can still edit it and make changes, and so that encourages me to share earlier, right?
It doesn't have to be perfect, but you just have to share.
Yeah, and then it's shared earlier. People can keep iterating on it. And I think that's what's happening in design as well. You can bring people into the process earlier. And by bringing people into the process earlier, then you can actually kind of like get better ideas. And it's more efficient because you hear people's feedback earlier. Yeah.
So I talked to a lot of designers in Japan. So they have very, pride in their work. So they want to make their design perfect before shipping or even to showing to their colleagues.
Right.
Do you think designers should also change their mindset?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to not be as precious. And so, for example, at Figma, when you open a file, you don't know who made what.
That's true.
Right. And of course, you can go into version history and see what happened, but most people don't do that. And the reason behind it is like, it's just the design, right? It's not somebody's design. Like you're a team working on it together. And so if more and more people think about it as, oh, we're solving it together, then I think it'll be easier to kind of have this mindset and make it more open. Yeah.
That's an interesting point because I use Figma, but I was wondering why there's like no name on the files. There's like the concept or the philosophy of a team working together. So it's not who or
Right. Because when I worked at YouTube at Google, this was before Figma existed. People used to have like a Google Drive or a Dropbox, and you say, oh, like Ryan's designs, and you go in there and you see who made what, right? And it was a little bit of a competition, who's better. And I think at the end of the day, like it doesn't actually matter what designs get made. Like you're all trying to solve a problem for your users in the business. So I think it actually is a better attitude to have to make it more of a team sport.
But Yuki, as a designer, do you have any like feelings? Do you want to stand out, or you want to compete, or
Right. I mean, I think that like there's always a way in which designers always have that energy, right? Of like you want to impress someone or come up with something original. And I think that energy is important, but you need to apply it in the right way. So sometimes, if you apply it to just the look and feel, that's actually might not be a good thing, because if you're building a product, you want it to feel kind of like one experience. One of the things that can happen is, for example, I think it was Larry Page who first said this at Google, which is like, don't ship your org chart. Right? And the meaning is, when a user looks at your product, it shouldn't be obvious, oh, this is team A, team B, team C,
It doesn't really matter to
right, because the user doesn't care, right? It's one experience. And so that was kind of like a thing he's talked about a lot. And I think, that's, if you become too original in like look and feel, then it creates a fragmented experience, right? Where users feel one way in this part of the user journey, and they start to see the gaps. So I think for that reason, it's not necessarily a good thing to apply originality to some aspects. But when it comes to solving a problem and saying, can I solve it better? Or can I come up with a solution that solves more problems? I think that's where the originality, the creativity should be applied. Yeah.
Do you think your philosophy or definition applies to like product designers or even to designers like in terms of like art?
It's hard to say. I'm definitely not an artist, so it's hard to say. And I think with art there's maybe a different objective. I think with product designers, I think that like with product design, it's not about the designer at all. You shouldn't be able to look at a product and see an artist, right? It's really about the best products. Even at Figma, we have a philosophy where it shouldn't be so obvious when our interface is there. It's like, because otherwise it'll get in your way because you're doing your own work.
Right.
If there's this Figma brand coming in all the time,
like distraction.
Yeah, it's very distracting. Yeah. And some of the best products, you kind of feel it's so natural and intuitive that it just kind of disappears. And I think those are maybe the best kind of products.
So you have worked at Uber. So how's Uber doing their designs?
I think, with Uber, one of the things that happened early on in the process was we had, in the early days, it was very, a little bit more siloed. Like when I first was working on the Uber app, our CEO, Travis Kalanick, told me once to take no more than 7 people, go to a different building, and just come back when you figure it out. And that was his feedback to me when he felt like I was taking too much time responding to everyone's feedback, and that was kind of the attitude at the time. And then, like a lot of things happen at Uber, and as part of the cultural change, there's a push to, how do we actually build in a more collaborative and open way? And that was when we actually went to look for a tool that would help us do that. And that's when we found Figma back in 2017. And so, Uber ended up being one of Figma's earliest customers.
So going back to your definition about design, so it's not just about like making like pretty things, but like defining and solving a problem. But could you show us how the steps will be of like defining and solving a problem? Like, do you have any examples or?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that like the way I think about it is, usually you're talking to the user in some way, or maybe you're using the product yourself, and that's how you start to build an intuition, right? But one of the things I think is really important is to keep asking why. So for example, a customer might say, hey, I want this feature in the Uber app or in Figma. And so one product team could say, okay, let's just build it and prioritize, right? But I think more important is you ask, okay, why are they asking for that feature? Well, because they have this problem. And once we understand the problem, maybe there's a better feature or a better solution, right? But you ask why one more time and you say, well, why do they have that problem in the first place? And maybe there's something about the setup or the environment or something assumption that's creating the problem in the first place. So then you might actually like solve that first. So, I think it was actually Toyota that had like the 5 whys. So it's kind of similar concept. Which is to keep saying why one more time. And I think the best product people are asking that to get to the ground level truth. And so that's kind of how you start to understand a little bit more and have confidence in what you're building.
So asking why, I think it applies to not just designers, but to engineers, like HR, even HR. So what's different about asking why in terms of design?
I think that maybe I have a more expansive view of design, which is I think that this kind of design thinking is something that you can apply to non-visual things too.
I see.
I think it's kind of business leaders should always ask more why, questions around why or what if, and these are all good questions to ask. But maybe the methodology is not typically how they go about it.
So when you ask questions, do you do it by yourself or do you talk to the customers or do you hold a brainstorm meeting with a bunch of colleagues? How do you do that?
I mean, I think it depends on your style, right? But for me, I personally just need to understand. So, maybe I'm taking a shower and I'm like, why is this, the case? And if I can't answer it, then I have to go back to the user or go back to your data or, something like that. But, I also think it's really important to get to a point where you can put yourself in the user's shoes and almost be able to answer those questions because you've really internalized what it's like to be a user.
I see. But you're the product officer, so how can you change your mindset becoming like a regular user? Because you have to change your mindset, or
Well, I think that I've been very lucky to work on a lot of products where I'm also a user.
Okay.
And that's both good and bad, right? The good part is I have intuitions. I know what's frustrating, things like that. Maybe the bad thing is I'm not representative of, the average user. But, not everybody gets to work on a product like that. And so you have to go out of your way to create the environment where you can really experience that. So, for example, when I was at Uber, I first worked on the rider side, which is easy because I'm a user. But then later I worked on the driver side where it's hard to understand, right? And so, we would go out driving ourselves, and I did about 60 trips driving Uber, delivering food. And it's the little things, right? Like when I was delivering food in New York, for example, just I felt, it was always kind of stressful to find parking, get food, or talk to the doorman who doesn't like you, and things like that. And I think once you start to understand those details, you're like, okay, this is what it feels like, and gives you more inspiration. And so I think that's really important.
I see.
To try to figure out how to get as close to the kind of emotions behind
of the users.
Yeah.
Do you think you have to go outside of the office, and for instance, for Uber, you have to literally drive the car or put your
I think so. And I also think that a lot of companies, after a period of time, you might actually want to hire users, who are even if they don't have the skill sets of a designer or product manager. Sometimes it's interesting to kind of just bring that perspective in, because a lot of times, over time you start to, if you get bigger, it's very easy to get out of touch.
If we just change our mindset from graphic design to product design, you think we'll be able to produce more cool products?
I think it's interesting because I think Japan is a market in which that kind of brand or physical design is still very huge. In many other markets, that's started to become smaller and smaller. And so I think, and in other markets, what's happened is those people who care about the emotions behind designs would then apply those skills to digital. And I think here, because that brand and print market still is doing very well, I don't think that's fully happened yet. And so, that transformation, as well as people moving more and more of the experiences to the digital realm, is what I think will change some of